It appears that the Uvalde Police Department and the Uvalde Independent School District police forces are no longer cooperating with the Texas Department of Public Safety's investigation into the massacre at Robb Elementary School and the state's review of law enforcement response. This is according to multiple law enforcement sources telling ABC News. So they're not cooperating into the investigation. According to sources, the decision to stop cooperating occurred soon after the director of DPS, Colonel Stephen McCraw, held a news conference on Friday, during which he said delayed police entry into the classroom was the wrong decision, contrary to protocol. Reached by ABC News, a spokesperson for the Texas Department of Public Safety said the Uvalde Police Department and Uvalde CSID police have been cooperating with investigators. The chief of the Uvalde CSID police provided an initial interview, but has not responded to a request for a follow-up with the Texas Rangers that was made 2 days ago. So now, wait a minute. We have conflicting reports, which again is not surprising given how the entire response here was filled with conflicting reports. Again, you had initial reports from the police that turned out to be wrong. And so now you also have an issue where we don't know if they're actually cooperating. We have no idea. Are they cooperating or not? I wish they would send a clear message. But this entire situation, again, including, not just the probe, but their response to their response, it just shows that they have absolutely no message at all. And look, I know why, at least I can think why. It's because the situation looks very, very bad for a PR standpoint for the police. I mean, there's no reason that they couldn't have went into that classroom to save the children. In fact, they were supposed to. That has been protocol ever since after Columbine. You go in with what you got. If you respond to the scene, you're going in there. You take out the shooter before they can kill more children. Now, obviously, the Uvalde police did not do that. And so you had the local police and you had all these different departments that were involved. And then you also had Border Patrol, Customs and Border Patrol agents. They're the ones that ultimately stormed into the classroom. And so during that time, of course, you had over an hour where you had police stacked outside the door. 19 police outside the door. One for every dead child, by the way, that were just waiting. And so, again, they have no good answer for why they have waited. These police officers, as I showed you before, they had body armor, level 4 body armor, capable of stopping rifle rounds. The police were very well funded and very well armed. In fact, 40% of the budget actually went to the police department. The Uvalde Police Department. This is not Baltimore. This is not Minneapolis. Nobody even attempted to defund the police, which, by the way, all the attempts to defund the police have been clawed back, and now we're back to basically refunding the police, giving the police even more and more money. Congress giving them more money. Biden promising to give them more money. And so this has never been an issue of police being defunded, right? And in fact, look, in Uvalde, the mayor seemed pretty right-wing to me. Now, if your argument is, and the reason that I bring it up, if your argument is, well, we didn't deep throat the police boot enough, and that's why they didn't go in, because they were demoralized, or they didn't have the money, they didn't have the equipment. Well, you're very, very mistaken about that. Very mistaken. They had the money, they had the equipment, they had the training, they had the backup, they had the numbers. And you know what they didn't have? The balls, apparently, to go into that room and to confront one shooter armed with an AR-15 without even any body armor. Well, they had all the advantages. No. Not an active shooter situation. No, we can contain him. So now, look, this is why, and I know this is not a popular position. at least when it comes to liberals, Democrats, but hear me out, right? I think this is exactly why defund the police is the right position. I will definitely admit that the optics are terrible about it, okay? The slogan, the optics, sure, they sound both terrible. I get it, especially when you have spikes in crime in places like New York, LA, and things like that, places like that, okay? But let me just counter it with the fact that funding, all the funding of police, all the billions of dollars, for example, pumped into the NYPD and the LAPD, did they do a whole lot to deter crime? No. And certainly, of course, they didn't do a lot to solve that crime. It turns out, and we know this from years, that militarized police, having a militarized police force, does not do anything to deter crime. And by the way, on the other side of that argument, neither did having an uber armed populace. Because guess what? Texas has both. Yes, you have incredibly loose gun laws in Texas. And you have very militarized police. Didn't stop crime, didn't stop mass shootings for sure. There were plenty of good guys with guns. 19 of them stacked outside of a door. And they couldn't stop one person before killing 19 children and 2 adults. And wounding 17 others. By the way, I don't think enough people talk about that, and I'm guilty of that myself, okay? So those 17 wounded children, well, guess what? They're going to have to deal with some of this for a very, very long time. The rest of their lives. Not only, of course, with the mental trauma, PTSD, but you also have the physical trauma as well. You know, we live in this country where we don't have health care. So, not only are they shot, injured, bullet fragments, and, having to go to the hospital, then their parents have to pay the bill. This is a barbaric system where we now are charging victims medical bills that they're going to have to pay for a very, very long time. And again, that's not even counting how much therapy these children are going to need and the fallout from PTSD. And so those are the survivors. Not to mention, of course, the dead who, again, could have, in many cases, probably could have been saved. I mean, we don't know for sure. But throughout that hour, how many do you think bled out? Because the police didn't do their job. They didn't do what they were supposed to do. And so, no. Well, look, and by the way, getting back to crime, right? So, look, defund the police because we have to get at the root of crime. Now, oftentimes that comes down to things like addiction, poverty, mental illness, yes, some very taboo subjects, but things that you can actually do stuff about, policy. And so, look, not only that, but you also have to, because we know that the best way to stop crime is to prevent it. The best way to stop mass shootings are to prevent mass shootings, right? Police are only there to react to after the fact, after the people are already dead. Prevention should be the main focus of this discussion. Yeah, we know the police were cowards. They were trained to be cowards. We know that. But understand that also, this never would have happened had Salvador Ramos not been able to get his hands on a high-powered rifle as easily as he had. And I think that gets lost in this conversation as well. It's very important to continue to talk about, hey, maybe we need to find some ways to make sure that people cannot, who by the way, have a history of abuse, as we've seen in some of his online discussions where he had threatened rape, where he had threatened violence against others, to prevent people from being able to get these weapons. And we can also talk about, because as I've said before, the mass shooting problem, the gun violence problem, it's not just only about guns. It is also about the other things that are mentioned. It's also about, things like mental health. It's also about socioeconomic issues like poverty and addiction, et cetera, et cetera. If you're actually going to solve this problem, you're going to have to solve all of those, not just one thing. And also have a discussion about our culture and change our culture from one that is gun and death obsessed to one that actually celebrates and protects life.